use it.
How you doing, big guy?
Good, how are you?
I like the time. Thank you. I did that support of veterans. Oh, the money fell.
Oh, that's right.
The money's all over the place.
Spilling over.
There you go.
Oh, hey, Sandra.
Last week.
Want to file it higher?
It's some diversity here.
Just so you I didn't see you.
They don't
I still keep up with Ashley Star Wars. The ball still awesome. Yeah, it's so much nicer. She's like busy, but that's awesome. It's fun to see. I've been trying to keep up on the outfit on the fan speculation.
Don't start now.
They knew.
This is
We will not be impeded. Exactly. Did anybody see a Koch brother wandering around the hallway?
Thanks. It's fun.
From the zoo and right. You got it yesterday. Everybody got there.
I got it Sunday. Yeah, so it's a lot of fun.
That's how
It's just been some dedicated lifetime travel. Yep. So it was good. How about you? Was there anything else?
It was good. Yeah, it's great. Today's a good day.
It works. It's an area.
Yeah. Yeah, we should catch up.
Great coverage, man.
So we're gonna, it'll be, I'll do the intro. And then we'll go to
Yeah, first.
Matt first, so that's one J. And then after they speak, anything you guys can add, whatever ones you guys want, and then we'll go through the books. Okay? Good morning. Thank you for waiting through the fire alarm with us. I'm State Senator Chris Larson. Today we're introducing the Campaign Integrity Package, which includes 8 bills that seek to ensure that our democracy is a democracy and not a plutocracy, where influence can be purchased. We've seen the slide in that direction in recent elections, and so we're stepping forward today with a set of bills that will restore Wisconsin's place as a place that's known for clean elections. We were once admired for our tough campaign finance laws that protected both the public voice and the integrity of our political process. Those laws have eroded, and therefore we're introducing this package today. We can clearly see on the graph the increase in spending from 2014 to 2016. Huge jump in millions of dollars coming into play to purchase influence in the state. This increase is not from a boom of small donations from our neighbors. It's a right of citizens to have a strong voice in a healthy democracy and not to be buried by the bags of corporate special interest money that are now free to be dumped into Wisconsin campaigns. Given the attacks on our democracy and the rapid moves to legalize corruption by Walker and legislative Republicans, we're putting forward 8 clean campaign bills that put Wisconsin back on the right side of our history. Today I stand with a number of my fellow legislators who share our concerns about campaign finance laws in Wisconsin. So we have State Representative Melissa Sargent, State Representative Jimmy Anderson, State Representative Jonathan Brostoff, and State Senator Dave Hansen with us, who are free to make comments here in a minute about why they're here and why this is important to them. We're also joined by Matt Rothschild from the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign and Jay Heck from Common Cause in Wisconsin. These are nonpartisan watchdog groups, and they were among the first to sound the alarm over the danger of the Republican gutting of our Chapter 11 campaign finance laws. In fact, these 8 bills reflect some of the most egregious problems with our campaign finance laws that these groups have identified in recent years. And I'd like to invite Matt Rothschild to come up and speak about the package.
Thank you, Senator Larson. Thank you all for coming. I'm Matt Rothschild. I'm the Executive Director at the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign, now into its 22nd year as a nonprofit watchdog for clean and transparent government, a democracy where everyone has an equal say. I'd like to thank Senator Larson for having the courage and the foresight to take the lead on this crucial issue for our democracy at this moment. His 8 proposals would go a long way toward rectifying the disaster that occurred in November 2015 right in this building, when Republicans in the legislature totally rewrote our campaign finance law, which is called Chapter 11, in which now is actually bankrupting our democracy. Governor Walker's slogan, as you know, is Wisconsin open for business, but this law, which he signed, made Wisconsin open for bribery as never before. It turned Wisconsin politics more and more into a playground for corporations, dark money groups, and the very rich, a playground that is essentially fenced off to the rest of us. It did this by doubling the amount of money that rich individuals could give to candidates, by putting no limit whatsoever on what rich individuals can give to political parties, PACs, and legislative campaign committees, by allowing corporations for the first time in more than 100 years to give directly to political parties, and by legalizing coordination with issue advocacy groups and defining coordination so narrowly that candidates can now coordinate with a wink and a nod, even with express advocacy groups. Senator Larson's proposals would undo the damage on all these fronts. And another key proposal by Senator Larson is to endorse Senator Erpenbach's bill to lift the veil on the dark money groups that are splattering our screens with mud every election time. We should be able to know who's paying for that mud. And one of Senator Larson's proposals to endorse Senator Erpenbach's bill would do just that, forcing these dark money groups to disclose the name of anyone who gives them $100 or more. Senator Larson's proposals offer other reforms that are necessary for transparency and openness, like requiring donors to list their employers' names, as they used to have to, and requiring all PACs to register with the state, not just PACs that spend 50% or more of their money here. I just want to give a quick example. Right now, instead of the richest person in Wisconsin being able to give $10,000 to the candidate for governor of their choice, that billionaire can now give $20,000, which is an amount that practically no one in Wisconsin can even contemplate giving. But if I'm running for governor and I've got this billionaire friend, you know what? I'm going to tell my billionaire friend, don't be a chump. Don't write me a check or my campaign a check for $20,000. I got a better idea. Write a check for $200,000 or $2 million to this outside group that I'm going to work with. It's got a cutesy name like Badgers for Eternal Victory. Write the check to Bev. And I'm going to go talk to Bev, and I'm going to give them a radio script that they can run all over the state, and I'm going to suggest how many times they run it. So it would be exactly as if my billionaire friend gave me the $20,000, except it's 10 times or 100 times the legal limit. And the kicker is, Bev doesn't have to disclose the name of my billionaire friend. No one would know about it. That's the problem. There's a huge runaround the campaign finance limits and the requirement for disclosure. That's what the revised, ruined campaign finance bill did back in November 2015, and that's why these bills, one of the reasons these bills are so important to correct that problem. Thank you very much.
Introduce next Jay Heck.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you. I'm Jay Heck, Director of Common Cause in Wisconsin since 1996. And I just want to start off my remarks by saying that 20 years ago, it would have been inconceivable to hold a press conference like this to talk about the reforms, great reforms, that Senator Larson and others are putting forward today, because most of them were the current law back then. And as others have mentioned, Matt has mentioned, this repeals, or the actions of the Assembly, the Senate, and Governor Walker last November repealed the great laws that we had in place for a long time in this state. Back in the late 1990s, when I began at Common Cause, there was a bipartisan consensus, both political parties, to go much beyond these reforms. We were talking about 100% public financing for campaigns. We were talking about issue ads, requirements that the money that be used to pay for them come out of political action committees, not come out of corporate or union treasuries. The types of reforms back 20 years ago were beyond. What Senator Larson and the others here today are trying to do is really get us back to 1998, where we were before this deterioration in our campaign finance law. And as I say, most of these were the law back then. The most serious problem is, as Matt mentioned, the legalization of the coordination between issue ad groups and campaigns. And the example Matt gives is a good one. It was just 20 years ago that Justice John Wilcox of the Wisconsin Supreme Court, won an election pretty handily in a big spending race, the first really that we ever had in Wisconsin. But his campaign and he were accused and found guilty of illegally coordinating with an outside special interest group who ran issue ads, not express advocacy, but issue ads. And that was against the law. That was, as you know, changed in 2015. In a sense, it was done to decriminalize what had happened during the 2012 election, during the recall campaign, when Governor Scott Walker's recall campaign was being investigated for illegally coordinating with Wisconsin Club for Growth, in which millions and millions of dollars flowed in to his campaign. And of course, that same organization was thought to have also supplied a great deal of money to 5 of the current 7, or 4 of the current 7 Supreme Court justices. So we're looking at getting back to 1998. I just want to say that these reforms are obviously well needed. They're overdue, and they're, I think, something that we would do well to go back and enact immediately. I just wish that there was the same kind of strong Republican support that there were for these common sense reforms that there were back in the late 90s. I'll just finish by saying that in 1998, in a special election in the 28th Senate District, when Judge Edelman was named a federal judge, there was a special election in which Mary Lazick defeated Brian Manthe for a state Senate seat that cost about $400,000. Everybody was so alarmed in this building that Governor Tommy Thompson called a special session of the legislature on campaign finance reform. And both houses of the legislature were controlled by the Republicans. They wanted to enact stricter limits on campaign contributions, require more disclosure. Now, it fell apart at the last few days over differences in opinion. But I just want to end by giving you all a copy of a press release that was issued by the chair of the Assembly Campaign and Elections Committee at the time, Representative Scott Walker of Wauwatosa. And he proposed at that time that all out-of-state groups report the source of their funds. He said, quote, "Our proposal would require every political group that spends money on campaigns in Wisconsin to disclose where that money comes from," said Walker. "For all we know, some of this money could be coming from foreign sources." And that proposal mirrors one of the proposals that's being introduced today. So hopefully we'll hear from the East Wing announcing their support for at least one of the reforms that's being proposed today. Thank you. And by the way, I'll just put this up here and you can get copies of it. I'll give you guys all one too.
Thank you. Thank you, Jay. It sounds like we may have some bipartisan support from the governor, whether he recognizes it or not. Before I briefly describe the 8 proposals and what they would do and why they're needed, I'd like to invite my colleagues up for a chance to speak about why they're joining us today in addressing this growing problem that's shutting out the voices of our neighbors. Representative Sargent?
So last year, or last legislative session, when these bills were being debated in the legislature, my constituents were reaching out to me and saying, this is moving us in the wrong direction. So I'm really thankful for Senator Larson in his response, quite frankly, to the people of Wisconsin. That's our job. Our bosses are the people that are out there in the community. And quite frankly, there is too much money that is coming in and adding undue influence to policy in the state of Wisconsin. And that is moving us in the wrong direction. It's making sure that corporations and millionaires and billionaires are getting their way and ordinary everyday Wisconsinites are not having their voices represented in this building in the way that they should be. And that's why I'm proudly standing up here with Senator Larson and our partners on the outside, because we are hearing the voices of the people of Wisconsin. That's ultimately our job. That's why we are sent here. Thank you.
Thank you. State Representative Jimmy Anderson.
Squishing your toes. Hopefully I'm not kicking too much of that money around.
Move the money.
Alright. Let's see if I can get a little taller here so you can see me over the microphones. So first off, I just want to thank Senator Larson and Matt and Jay for all the work that they've done on this really important issue, and I'm going to keep it relatively short because I think everything that's been said before really speaks to the power of these bills and the need for Wisconsin election law here in Wisconsin. But I'll just say we keep spending millions and millions more on campaigns, and our politics are not getting better, and damn sure our politicians are not getting any better. So we need to do something to address these obviously really egregious issues, and I think these bills are a wonderful first step on the road towards curing this problem. But that's all. Thank you.
Well, I'm State Senator Dave Hansen, and if we go back to 2000, since I'm in my 17th year now, I believe my race, that Senate race back in 2000, was the first $1 million Senate race. I think they've gotten a lot more expensive than that today, and everybody was appalled back then. So in 2015, they increased the limits and less disclosure and all that. But I want to just touch on one real quick point. A lot of what is happening in Madison today is about following the money. And we can talk about the high capacity well bill that passed. And we can talk about how we have a senator no longer with us because these laws were in place, giving away, disclosure. Senator Lassa was removed because she didn't support that bill. So the people that wanted that bill came out, spent a lot of money, and to me that's just really, really wrong. You stand up for principle, and then a bill passes, and you remove a senator because you don't agree with them. Way too much money in politics. And if you take the polling out there, the survey would say they don't want all that money in politics. They do not. So I want to thank Senator Larson, all these packages of bills, and the rest of the people involved. We really have to look at what's going on, not only in Wisconsin, but throughout our country. We can do it better. Our democracy deserves that.
Thanks everyone for coming out. Thank you to Senator Larson and my other colleagues for representing on this really important issue. And we've heard a lot of kind of intricacies about the bills today and kind of generally what this is about. But at the end of the day, the idea that money represents free speech is antithetical to America and to the American way. Because in America, in a democracy, you're supposed to have access. Everyone's supposed to have access. So if you say, well, there's a handful of people that get the most say and the most influence and have the most money, and they can kind of squash out the freedom of speech that everyone else gets to say, that's not one person, one vote. That's exactly what we're experiencing today, which is the worst policies money can buy. It's about selling out to the people that have the biggest paychecks, whatever the policies are, whatever the cost is, whatever damage they're doing to our schools, to our environment, to our public policy. They don't care because they're going to win their re-election because they're going to be able to spend boatloads of money on attacking their opponents. It doesn't have to be true, by the way. They can lie. And by the way, we're also living in a time when our, unfortunately, investigative journalism is at its weakest, one of its weakest points in our country's history. So there's not that check and balance that exists in the sphere of public conversation now. They are buying think tanks left and right. They're buying old reporters. They're coming out with all sorts of, these kind of faux scientific studies. They're paying lobbyists left and right. They have lawyers constantly, suing for a more aggressive agenda. And why? It's not organic. It's not because the people of Wisconsin want more money in politics or the people in the whole country. This is an epidemic that is threatening our democracy and is one of the biggest threats we've ever faced. And the unfortunate part of where we've gotten today is it just snowballed. It's gotten bigger and bigger. And the more money they spend and the more laws that they can pass, the more money they can spend. The more politicians are for sale, the more policies that are hurtful to the general population get to be passed, because they can just buy more and more media next time, more and more ads, so it snowballs. So efforts like this are helpful in bringing a little bit of a check and balance, but they're nowhere near the end. This is the beginning. I look forward to continuing to work with my partners, and hopefully some partners on the other side who can put their conscience above power. And that's what we're talking about today. Thank you very much.
Well said by my colleagues. So just to talk about these, the 8 bills in their specific sense. Again, the entire package is called the Campaign Integrity Package, and it seeks to shift us away from where we are now, where instead of having elections, we're having auctions. So we want to shift it back to actually having democratic elections in the state of Wisconsin. So these are going to be handed out by my staff if they haven't been already. The 8 bills, and I can give you the LRB numbers too. LRB 1290 is the Sensible Limits Act. This proposal limits contributions to PACs, legislative campaign committees, and political parties to no more than $10,000. The second bill is LRB 1291. This is the 10K Limit Act. This shifts the overall contribution limit for statewide candidates from $20,000 back down to a more reasonable $10,000. LRB 1292, Limiting Special Interest Influence Act. This proposal reduces by half the donation limits on political action committees and contributions to candidates. Again, usurping influence. The fourth one is LRB 1293, Closing the PAC Loophole Act. This proposal closes a loophole in the legal definition of a PAC that groups use to bypass donation limits. The fifth bill is LRB 1294, Issue Ad Reporting Act. This is one that we're working on a version with Jay and Matt, and then it became clear that this was something that leader on campaign finance law, Senator Erpenbach, has worked on a similar proposal, so we're just using his, which he will be introducing. This is a piece that was Senate Bill 201 last session, and it passed through the Senate last session, and it would allow for making sure that there is reporting in the end, as Matt Rothschild alluded to, making sure when there's late hits that there is reporting that goes along with it. The sixth one is LRB 1295, Coordination Control Act. This proposal places the same financial limits on coordinated expenditures between candidates and groups as are currently in place for direct contribution. So this cuts off the should be illegal coordination in the state of Wisconsin. LRB 1296, No Corporate Campaign Bribes Act. This proposal amends Wisconsin state statutes to prohibit a group from making contributions to segregated funds established and administered by a political party or legislative campaign committee. So it cuts off corporate contributions in the state, something a vast majority of voters want to see happen. And the eighth bill is LRB 1297, is Transparency for Campaign Contributions Act. This proposal restores the contribution limit of $100 and ensuring that when you give $100 or more that you report your employer as well as your occupation. Right now it's $200 or more and it's only the person's occupation. So those are the 8 bills. Again, there's a more detailed summary of the proposals available, and the co-sponsorship memos with specific language will be circulated shortly. The deadline for those proposals will be June 21st for all the bills in the campaign integrity package. So thank you for being here today. Any questions? This is the time now. These are bills. Me and my office was working directly with Matt Rothschild and Jay Heck on for a number of weeks, given the reporting and given what they know as nonpartisan watchdog groups. These are the most common sense bills We're introducing them today, and we're hopeful that between now and June 21st, that these are some of the things, as was mentioned by Jay Heck, that even some Republicans have called for in the past. This is, election integrity should not be a partisan issue. My sense is, I think it would be embarrassing if I were the member of a party that had 0 members signing on to clean elections bills. So my hope is these will be bipartisan. Excellent. Thank you so much.
We supported it. It was blocked in the Senate.
You're my representative.